Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange, the podcast that disrupts how we think about blindness and low vision. So join us as we amplify the voices of individuals, families, and professionals living, learning, and thriving with blindness and low vision. We're your hosts, Janet Lebrecq and Carlos Servan. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Visionary Voices Exchange. I'm your host, Janet Lebrecq, and I have an amazing guest who is joining me today to talk about Braille, but also to talk about self-employment. And also, I just learned some interesting information about Miss Gail Smith, who is also an avid knitter. It seems to be your favorite pastime, Gail.
Yes, it is. And thank you, Janet, for having me on here today.
You are very welcome. I would love for people to learn some information about you. So, for example, maybe you can share with our listeners where you're from and what your eye condition is, how you lost your vision, and then we're going to dive deep into some questions around that. But then we want to also talk about employment and specifically why we reached out to you today to talk about self-employment. So take it away.
Okay. I live in Alabama, and I have, of course, you can probably tell from my accent, I have always lived in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And I went blind when I was young. I actually went blind on my 14th birthday, and it was caused from an infection in the fluid around the brain. I think they call it the cerebral fluid. Mm-hmm. They called it a pseudotumor cerebri because it just caused a lot of pressure in my head, and it gave the same effects as having a tumor, but I didn't actually have a tumor. It was just the pressure from all that fluid, and it damaged my optic nerve. So I lost all of my vision on my 14th birthday. That's when I went totally blind. And that's been quite a while back. So
what was that experience like, besides obviously being traumatic, but also what was that experience like to make that kind of an adjustment so quickly? But also, in addition to that, what was it like for your family, and how did you gain support, from them and from others?
Well, I think being young, I was still in school, so that was a big thing. After I was quite, not well there for quite a while. But when I went back to school, I went back as a totally blind person. And I'm going to say this, I went blind in December of 1969, so that was a long time ago. And there wasn't any technology or computers, or there really wasn't a lot out there for blind people. And we just mainly, we had to rely on Braille, and we did have recording devices, but we just didn't have the advantage of all the note takers and the Braille displays. And nowadays there's so much, that's available, but it was a whole different thing years ago before the technology came along. So it was, most of it was just trying to have people to read to me and trying to remember everything. So, but I did get through, my education. I finished my education. I took some advanced courses in business office, and I tried to further my education as much as I could, because I really wanted to be employed. And I knew without the education that I wouldn't have a very good opportunity of employment. So I went into business office. That's what I decided I would major in. And I was very, very blessed in that there was a teacher that taught a business office course at one of the high schools. And she actually came and asked me if I'd like to be in her class. So she, before and after her regular classes, she would read me the typing manual. And so I always credit my success to her, because when I left her class, I was an excellent typist, and it really benefited me in years to come, because using the keyboard on the computer. So my very first job that I got was right after I completed my business office course, and I got a job as a typist for the Jefferson County Circuit Court system, and I typed up legal documents and depositions and things like that. That was my very first job. So that was a long time ago.
Wow. So you went to public school then?
Yes.
During high school?
I did. I just went to public school, and it was the same school I had been going to when I had vision. So I knew the layout of the school and everything. And so I had, and my friends and people in the class and all, they would, if I got in a jam or needed something read to me, they would help me also. And the teachers are very understanding. And most of my tests back then in high school was just, they would have someone read it to me and I would just tell them the answer because they couldn't read Braille. And we didn't have a lot of services in the public school system like they do available now. We just didn't have anybody that was there to help people with any kind of a disability. And it was just very limited. So it was just different sort of back then than it is now. There wasn't a lot available.
Yeah, the times are definitely very different with all the technology solutions that we have today. Who actually taught you Braille?
Originally, I didn't have anyone to teach me Braille. Originally, I just got the let me see what it was. It came in three books on Braille, and it had the alphabet, and it progressed through the 3 manuals. And I contacted a lady I was trying to think when that was. I had just gone blind, so maybe I was like around 15 or 16, and I contacted vocational rehab through the help of a teacher at the school and indicated I would like to learn Braille. And so she came out and brought the books, and she left them with me, but then she moved out of state. So I just went through the books, and then later down the road, I really knew Braille, but I just did a refresher course, and they had a Braille teacher to come out and go over everything with me and just make sure I was doing it correctly. And that was...
You were pretty motivated, to be able to get that access to Braille, because that gave you a sense of belonging and certainly a sense of literacy, to be connected to learning Braille.
Well, when I could see, I love to read, and I think I just always credit reading as really being helpful in my life. And so when I went blind, I still wanted to be able to read, and it took me a while to really build up very much speed, but I did. Over years, I got really well at Braille. I love Braille, and if I didn't enjoy it so much, I wouldn't still be doing it. But I love Braille.
Well, it certainly led you to your career today, and I want to just talk for a moment about after the onset of you losing your sight so quickly. What was that like for your family? And do you have siblings, within your family? And what was that like?
Yes, I was the oldest. At that time, there was 5. I had 4 siblings. I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and I was the oldest. And, it was quite an adjustment, I think, for everybody. Mm-hmm. But the main thing was I just wasn't well there for quite a long time. And after I got better, I think after that infection, it was, after it all got cleared up and I was feeling better, I sort of jumped right back into the thing, like I had been cooking for the family. So I jumped right back into cooking and just sort of doing for the family. They didn't ever say, "Oh, poor thing can't see." They just sort of ignored the whole thing. And I think that was sort of helpful to me because I didn't get a lot of sympathy. It's like, we still have to eat dinner and everybody's working, you need to cook. So I didn't get a lot of, I don't know what you'd call it. I just didn't get a lot of empathy there. It's like, they're like, okay, we just got to get on with life. And so they expected me to do that. And I did. And I think for that, if they had probably, like say, oh, you don't need to do this, you might get hurt, or you don't need to cook, you might get burnt, or you don't need to, you don't need to cut up potatoes because you might cut yourself. But they didn't ever say any of that. I was the oldest. There was a house full of us, and later on, there was six children and the parents, and so they just expected me to carry on with my part of the family. So I really think in the long run, I think it really benefited me a lot. At the time, I was like, how do they expect me to do this? I can't see what I'm doing. And I didn't have anybody to come and like teach me Braille, like blindness skills, like teach me like how to cut up stuff or how to chop vegetables with a knife. I just sort of figured things out myself because I didn't even know anybody else that was blind. So I would figure me out a way to do things and I'd just do it. So I think it did help me, though, because it helped me to be more of an independent person rather than like always dependent on somebody.
Sure. And that's how people build up resilience, and you become more adaptable and flexible and kind of taking that first step, to certainly be an active person, but being encouraged to do things, regular daily activities like cooking and like cleaning. Those expectations were there and the encouragement was there, which is great.
And all of my siblings, my sisters and my brothers, they were all really great, like to help me. Like when we would go places, they would let me walk with them. We even went to the skating rink, and I would just hold one of them's hand and skate around like I had good sense. I did all kind of things.
You did have good sense because you were smart enough to hold on to their hand. So that was very smart.
I would just grab hold of one. My brother, he especially was really good about letting me skate with him, and I'd skate with him. And when we'd go do things, and I'm talking, as teenagers, like we went up to Cherokee, North Carolina, and we would walk way up this river creek. I'm not sure what they call it, but it was some parts of it was, over our heads and some parts wasn't, but we would take our inner tubes up there and get in, and we would float way down. And I always just did that with the rest of the kids. We'd all just do that. But I did have a funny thing happen one time. One of my brothers, he grabbed my inner tube. They didn't want me to just like go over because we went past the area to get off or to get out of the water. You'd go over a waterfall. And so they would want to hold on to me. So one of my brothers grabbed my inner tube, and the other brother grabbed my foot, and they pulled me off the inner tube. The inner tube went one way, and I went the other way. It was always stuff going like that. It was just fun. We had a lot of fun, though. We did things together.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you had a very normal childhood and great relations with your siblings. So that's wonderful. Can you talk
it was truly a blessing.
Can you talk for a moment about when you received rehabilitation services formally, and when did you know that you said earlier you wanted to be able to work and you always wanted to be able to work, but how were you able to put that together? And did some of that come through receiving rehabilitation services?
Well, my first job really did not. I was just, like I said, at that time, I didn't know anybody else that was blind. And I was thinking, like, what kind of a job would I do? And I talked to this lady that she was a court typist for different company than I worked for, because there's a lot of different court reporting firms. Now it's all done on computers. But back in the day, the court reporters would go in and take it down on stenotype, and then they would dictate it onto cassettes, and they had typists that would type that up. And so she was doing that, and so I talked to her, like, I think I could do that, because I think I could type, and there's no reason I couldn't type that up, especially, listening to a cassette and just typing it. So I called every court reporting company in Birmingham, which is the largest town close to where we live. And there was like 7 or 8 court reporting firms. And I called every one of them to say, do you need a typist? And trying to get me a job. But when I would tell them I couldn't see, they would take my number and get back with me. And so I was down to the very last one. And I really wanted a job so bad. And I was young, I guess I was like not 18 or 19, and I wanted a job really, really bad. And so I finally talked to the owner of the company, and I told him that if he would just give me an opportunity to work, that I would work a whole month for free. And he said, well, he'd take me up on the free offer, and he wasn't going to promise to hire me. But my brother would go down and pick up, one of my brothers would go down and pick up my cassettes, and I would go with him, and they would take me down, and I'd get my cassettes and come out, and then I would just type them, at home. I had an office at the house, and I would type up the documents, and then we would take them back. That's how it started. But I did the very first deposition I did. It wasn't really a huge one. It was only like a couple of 100 pages. And in the whole thing, I had, like one error. And so he not only hired me immediately, but he paid me more per page than he did anybody else, because I didn't have a lot of errors to correct. So then we got it set up where he would call and dictate it over the phone, like by a dictaphone. So I didn't have to make all them trips into Birmingham, but it was a really nice setup. And I did that for quite a few years there until the computers came along. And when the computers started coming along, they started running the stenotype through a thing that would read it on the computer. So the computer sort of took my job away from me at the time.
Yeah.
So I did that I was a court typist for a long, long time. I've actually had several jobs in my life. And so when I'd get out a job, though, I just really, really put a lot of effort into finding a job. I think this is one thing. You can't, if you want a job, you really sort of have to be diligent about it. Because if you just say, you don't need anybody to work, do you? Of course they're going to say no.
Yes.
And so a lot of times it's how you approach somebody. And you sort of have to believe in yourself, because you're really selling that person on the fact that you can do it. I did run into several issues, because after I got out, after I quit working for the court reporting firm, I found out there was a job available at the Birmingham News. And all it was taking down classified ads. So they had a little form, which I could set my typewriter up to, fit their forms where I could type everything into the correct field. And people would be calling in classified ads, and all you do is fill out a form with their name and their contact and what they wanted for an ad, and they would send them a bill. It was like way back then, they didn't even do anything, credit cards or anything over the phone. I knew I could do that job, and you only had to type 35 words a minute, which was just like nothing really to me. And so I went down there to apply, and they wouldn't even let me put in an application, because she said I had to be able to fill the application out myself. And in the typing test, they had a piece of paper that had what they wanted you to type. And my driver said, well, I could read that to her. And they said, no, that would be helping her, and nobody can help her. And I said, well, I can type, and I'm going to be just taking in ads over the phone. So I asked that lady if she was taking my application, and she wouldn't let me. She just wouldn't let me take the test or fill out the thing because I couldn't see. So, I had to face that kind of things too, which those things are a lot better now than they used to be back in like the 70s. So,
sure. I think that there are so many individuals who are blind or who have other disabilities who've had similar experiences, when they're out there, trying to do what everybody else is trying to do, which is learn, but certainly, looking for employment, but finding people sometimes to believe in you and to allow you that opportunity to really demonstrate your skill sets, it can be challenging. And it's something I wish I could say it doesn't exist anymore, because it does. But certainly, I think that technology has really helped to leverage that playing field. But also, I think, us being out here in the communities, people that are blind, people that have other disabilities out here in the labor market, in the communities, participating, I think helps that situation. But also, obviously, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, certainly helps, with that as well. So, but you were pretty persistent for sure.
Well, I think that's what it takes. I think you have to believe in yourself, because you're actually trying to sell yourself and your qualities to somebody else and get them to believe. You have to believe in yourself first, though. And I think it is hard. It's really hard to find employment. And I've always managed to be employed, but it's not always been really easy to find that job. I was just saying, like, just because I've been employed in several places, it's like, not because I haven't really, really worked at it.
So here you are today. You have your own business. You provide a service to organizations, individuals who might need Braille transcribed. Talk about what that journey was like. What gave you the courage to start your own business? And where did you get some help, with doing that? Because, let's face it, not everybody knows how to start their own business. And usually, those of us that are doing that, we're looking for help from others. We're looking for information. We're looking for resources to be able to get started. So what was that journey like for you?
Well, I think my Braille, as far as my beginning of my Braille business, it happened years and years before I actually started my business full time, because I got my very first computer. I think it was 89. And back then I was using DOS, and I had Megadots, and I had got me a Braille embosser because I was working for heating and air company, and so I had to get me a Braille embosser so that I could. And I just got a Braille embosser that I could afford. But once I started doing Braille, show people, like, I was so excited about having a way just to, like, do Braille on a machine like that through the computer. It was so wonderful. And so someone that knew me called me and said that the American Diabetes Association needed some stuff brailled, and would I do it? They couldn't find anybody to braille it. So I just started like that. It was just like I was working full time with this heating and air company, and I was doing Braille on the side for different people. I was doing flyers, and I really wasn't drawing a lot of business cards back then. That would be done by hand, but I was doing a lot of flyers and all kind of brochures, and I ended up having a pretty good side job just doing Braille. And so I really sort of built up over a number of years. And then '95, I changed to Windows computer, and I was also, my job changed. I ended up working for a construction company that built hotels in the Southeast. And so I worked for them full time for, I don't know, a long 12, 15 years. So all this time that I was doing all this, I was doing Braille on the sides. Like, people would just say, could you Braille this? Or we need, 100 copies of this, or 50 or 10. And I would Braille it. So I sort of had me a side job going, doing Braille all those years. And then it came up, it came on until the economy got bad. And when the economy was getting sort of bad, they ended up losing a lot of the contracts on their hotels. And so I worked on for several months to finish getting the office work done, because I was into the office. I always did office work, right. I wrote out all the checks on the computer and all the address labels to mail all the checks, because back then we did checks. But nowadays, I don't think most people do checks, but back then, and I did. Yeah, things have just really changed, haven't they?
They have.
But so when I sort of got out of that job, I was like, oh, I just need a job. And that's when I could not find anything. I just could not find anything. And so I went to vocational rehabilitation here in Alabama, and I'm like, I really need a job. And we talked about what I could do, and I was still picking up, Braille jobs on the side. So I was like still doing these Braille jobs. And so I called one day, would talk to my counselor. She was just really, really awesome. She helped talk me. We would meet and talk, go over different jobs. She had me speaking to, different people that were job placement people. We was just trying to find me a job, but the job market was not really very good, and there just wasn't. It just seemed like there wasn't hardly anything for a blind person out there. And it's like every job I would find, they would, along with the job duties, it's like I could do nearly everything, but then there would be some filing, or they would be going and picking up the mail. It seemed like every single job I found, there was some element of it that I was not able to do as a blind person. And so it sort of was funny how it happened, because I called her and I said, I really need to change our meeting because I've got all this real work I need to do. And so we changed it. And then I changed it a second time because I still had all this real work I was doing. And so when I did go in to meet her, she's like, what do you mean you're doing all this real work? So I told her about my side job. And she was like, Gail, you're doing all this Braille. Why don't you just have that as your business? And I was like, I've never thought about doing it full time. I just never had really thought about it. So that was sort of funny. I'd been doing Braille for people all these years, and that's when I actually started my business, Gail Smith. And so at the time, she stepped up. They helped me get started. So what they did, my computer was quite old, so they got me a computer, and they got JAWS, and they got me a decent, Braille embosser, and they just got me started. They bought me Braille paper, just, like the minimum of what you would need to get started.
Sure.
But I want to take a minute, because it's not like they just do all this stuff. I had to draw up a business plan, just like anybody else doing a small business. I had to do a lot of research and say, how many other Braille businesses are there out there? How many people read Braille? What is the the potential for customers, and how am I going to contact, how are we going to get in touch with them? Am I going to advertise? And am I going to be able, how much work am I going to be able to turn out enough work? What's going to happen if I get unable to Braille? Am I going to have a backup system in place? It was like a 60-page business plan I had to draw up, and I had to do all of that. And I think what I might experience, they don't really just hand out a bunch of stuff if the person is not really dedicated. So it's like you really need to be all in, it seems to me, like, before they really want to help you. So I had a plan in place where I was going to start, had projections that was projected by, they actually offered me someone to consult with as far as doing a business plan. Mm-hmm. And that person would tell me what I needed to do. And his company, he worked with me, and so I would realize, what all's involved in doing a business plan. Because it's not like, you just think, oh, I think I'll do a Braille business. It's not quite that easy. I mean, is there really enough business out there to do it full time? And what if you do get sick? What are you going to do? Is your whole business going to just collapse if something major comes up and you can't work for a while? And you have to think about all this and, like, okay, so you Braille, are you going to be able to ship it out? Do you have a procedure where you know how to print shipping labels, and do you have a way to weigh your packages? Are you capable of packaging stuff up? It's a whole lot involved in it. It's way more than I initially would have just thought about. But
sure, and I don't think that business common at all. That people, even people without disabilities, they want to start a business, but a lot of businesses fail because they don't do that upfront work, that research, that preparation, that market analysis, as you talked about, sort of those strategies that you need to think about is, like you just described, well, what if I get sick and I don't have a backup, and how am I going to get the end product, to that company or to that person that's waiting for this material. And so there is a lot, that goes into the preparation and the understanding and finding the mentors, which it sounds like you did. You had a great counselor, and I commend her, for supporting you in that way. And then you had someone from the business side to kind of help you with that, the structure of your business plan. But most importantly, you were so committed to that, to learning and to actually doing of that business plan.
That's true. It takes a lot of commitment. And, sometimes we think, like, well, if we have our own business, we'll just set our own hours and we won't have to work as much. But it's not that way. If you own your own business, it's sort of like you live it 24 hours a day. It's like you don't really just get to go home at 5 o'clock. You might have customers waiting. And if you're going to maintain good service, you're going to have to give good service. So I work nights, weekends, whatever it takes. And I have a very good team that works with me, because we do a lot of print stuff. Like, I actually print business cards for people. And so I have to have sighted people to design those cards. And I contract with a company, and this lady, she owns her own graphic design business. And so she designs all my business cards for me. And then if, we email samples, and if they want changes, we do changes. So I've got that lined up. She does all of my print, anything that needs to be in print. Someone wants me to print a flyer, they send me the information or their logos, whatever they'd like on it. And she designs it up, and we send it for approval. And then I have people that help me with the actual printing, because I found this out. Of course, I can operate the printer and go and say, print 500 copies of this. But what I can't do is tell if as it's coming out of the printer, if for some reason it's smudging or the printer's running out of ink or, there's just all manner of things that happen. So I have sighted people that work with me to make sure that all the print looks nice and everything is like it's supposed to be as far as the print. I'm the only one that does the actual Braille, as far as setting all the Braille up and everything. Once I get it set up, they can operate the machines, but I have to set everything up. And so I have a very good team. I have 4 people that work for me part-time. So they don't usually all work at one time, but I have to have sighted people to help me with the print stuff. Sure. And even Brailling business cards. Okay, so say some people will ask me to print the business cards, and some people will just send me the business cards. So if they send them to me and they order them from from some printing company, a lot of times what happens is printing companies, they put cards in there advertising their printing company. Or maybe a card that says, and so I have to have when I'm Brailling cards, even before I run them through the machine or anything, I have to have a sighted person standing here making sure I'm printing the front of the card or the back of the card or making sure the card's turned correctly or, and so I just have found out I have to depend on those sighted people to help me with the printed stuff. So, I just really strive to do quality work. Been very, very blessed. Now I've had my business going. Let's see. I was trying to think how many years I had it going now. I think it's been 14 years.
Wow.
I saw my business plan the other day, and it was dated. My finished business plan was dated September of 2012. So maybe it's not been quite that many years. I guess in September it would be. So I'm very blessed. I just feel like I deal with the nicest people. That's one thing I really like is I guess I'm a people person. And I just love dealing with different people, and people call with all kind of different, projects to do. So I Braille a wide variety of stuff. I do some like flyers that hands out or brochures that'll have like print on one side and Braille on the other side. I do that. I do plenty of business cards. I do most anything. I mean, I couldn't list everything I've done.
Yeah.
I've even Brailled decks of playing cards.
And most women would not think about that. I mean, I've played with, playing cards before that have the Braille, but you don't always necessarily think about how did that get there.
Well, there's a company or an individual, I guess, that they designed this game. It's called Don't Break the Budget, and it's sort of teaching finance and how to balance your budget and everything. And it's a deck of cards. And so I have Brailled quite a few decks of cards for them, like lots and lots and lots and lots. And I think that's something that as blind people we need to know is how to balance our finances and all. And this is just that's a fun way to do it. So I always enjoy Brailling those cards, And I have one thing I wanted to do when I started Braille is I thought, well, just for the fun of it, I would do some greeting cards because one thing, when I would want a birthday card for someone, I would have to go to the store and then have someone to stand there and read cards to me. And, I hate to bother anybody, so I might just take a card pretty quickly because I don't want them to stand there a long time and read and read and read. So I just take something. But I always thought, wouldn't it be so neat if I could pick out my own cards? So I started out, I just got a handful of cards and I had someone to take pictures of them, and I had them to write down in a document like what it says and sort of describe a little about the picture, and then write what it says on the inside. And I ended up uploading that to my website, and it has grown now. I have 888 different cards up now. And I know that because Amazon, I sell on my website and I sell on Amazon. And I have like any kind of a greeting card, anybody has ever asked for. Like,
Wow, that is
so have a very wide selection of all kind of cards, and they're just regular cards like American greetings, or maybe heartfelt cards or popular greetings. It's just cards like you would find at any regular store. And what I do, I add Braille on top of it. I put a Braille overlay over the print, so sighted people can see it, and Braille, blind people can read it. And if they order them off the website, they just send me a note on what they'd like written on the inside, and I always can put their signature or their message on the inside in print or Braille. I was sort of surprised. A lot of people just order them and say they just want it all in print because it's a blind person ordering for a family member that can see.
I see.
So they'll say, "We'll just make this a print card." I never really thought of that, but I have a lot of those orders. But it's just like you can go in there and pick out your own card. So I just enjoy doing that. That's a fun part of my business too.
Well, I think you've opened a lot of doors for people, but your ability to think creatively about, not only what it is that you know that is needed out there, like, for example, the Braille cards that you just talked about, but also what you enjoy doing. And I think that that's one of the important things that people should think about when you're thinking about whether or not you want to own your own business, start your own business. And I love how you did it, how you started off slow. You still had a full-time job, but you were doing this on the side. And today we call that side hustles. And so many people are doing side hustles. And it's a great way to step into your own business, but it's also a great learning tool because it gives you that opportunity to try something and to see whether or not it's something that you really are going to enjoy, whether or not there's a market out there, but also whether or not it's something that you can make a living at. But you need that creative spark also, because that's what's going to help you to look at and say, hey, greeting cards, blind people can't just go to the Hallmark card store, and pick out cards without having to have someone read them to them. And again, technology today is a great leveraging tool that we have today. We have more options even in those areas, but I love how you keep it, down to earth, and that you have that flexibility and that ability to customize for your customers. So that's wonderful. But I want to thank you so much for sharing your self-employment journey, but also your personal story. And I hope that if people are listening, and if there are people thinking about, well, should I go to my local rehabilitation agency and ask for services? The answer is yes. Put yourself out there, take that first step. And certainly, if you don't get the response that you need, then you will knock on another door, because there's always another door that's going to open. But your story really does help individuals to understand that path that they need to take, and certainly to get the services. And you might not always be successful at something, but you always have a second chance to be able to try something again and do it. So I want to thank you for coming onto the program today, sharing your story, and certainly if you want to give people information about how they can reach your business, feel free to do so right now.
Oh, sure. My website is braillesmith.com. It's BrailleSmith all one word, just braillesmith.com. And on there, you'll find my phone number and my email and all my contact information. If you'd like, you can see my products. I have I talk about my Braille cards on there, the greeting cards. I have all my greeting cards on there. And I have, I talk about the business cards. And like you mentioned at the beginning, I just really enjoy knitting. And so I put some of my knitted house slippers up there just because I could. It was my website, so I just did it. But I love to knit, and that's just my favoriteest pastime other than Brailling. So just feel free. I'd love to hear from anybody that'd like to give me a call or email me. And if you have an idea of anything that could be in Braille, just call me and we'll see if we can work it out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us again today, and I wish you much success in the future. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So we'll look forward to another guest, and I hope that everyone stays safe and look forward to the next episode of Visionary Voices Exchange.